Welcome, Jonathan Hessen, and this is TV7's Editor's Note. And in today's edition, we're going to focus on Syria, Israel's northern front, the various challenges at hand, and stay tuned for some very important insight. To discuss this matter with me are two dear friends, mentor, and great minds of the State of Israel, to include, first and foremost, Major General in Reserve, Ha-Cohen.
Thank you.
It's always a pleasure to have you, formerly, of course, the commander of Israel's defense colleges and an Army Corps commander of Northern Command, among a long list of other positions. And to my left, Colonel in Reserve, Dr. Anan Wahabi, also a brilliant mind who has been very active in the defense of Israel, but the majority of those things will remain where they should, behind closed doors. Formerly, of course, an advisor of the Prime Minister's office, an intelligence officer, a man of many traits, lectured at Haifa University, and a senior fellow at the Institute for Counterterrorism at Reichman University. And we can go on and on, but we won't stop if we start to articulate all of your prior positions. Syria has been on our hearts and minds for quite many years. And of course, the lead up to the fall of the Assad regime was quite dramatic. We were, of course, very much in tune with what was happening there. But nonetheless, at the start of the developments, we realized that Israeli efforts to prevent Iranian entrenchment has frustrated the Ayatollah regime's capacity to support the Assad regime in the latter days of its survival in Damascus, which ultimately caused the fall of the Assad regime and brought about a new reality in Syria. Now, as I see it right now, the main challenge at hand from Israel's perspective is to ensure that within the sphere of influence of Israel, namely the 60 kilometers from Israel's northern border, will remain clear from any strategic weaponry. It will remain within the protected areas that Israel has already pledged to do, and will challenge any force trying to penetrate there. And unfortunately, what we do see is both Qatar, which openly does so, as well as Turkey and others trying to push back at Israel with support from European countries and a number of American lawmakers. And that is quite concerning, to say the least. Now, General Ha-Cohen, you have lived Syria for many years. When you look at the complexities at hand from Israel's perspective, what is the first thing that comes to mind?
The open question and a very radical uncertainty regarding the future of that new Syria. And we have really to detect very carefully whether it is coming to be a Sharia state, absolutely oriented to ideas of radical Islamism, with the ISIS and so on, or they are really succeeding to make a great U-turn toward a new state, a well-formed state, that giving respect and rights for all minorities, for all citizens, including Christians, Alawite, Druze, Kurds, etc. And it is very, very important to the Israeli security anxieties, because if it is going to be a well-stable state, that's a great future. But if not, it is a real new risk, including the support of Qatar and Turkey, that will really bring a new threat in the border of Israel.
Colonel Wahabi?
According to the Israeli National Defense strategy, we need to live in peace with our neighbors, but we prefer to live beside states and not non-state militias. So when we watch what's going on in Syria right now, Iran out, Turkey in, this interference, rebuilding a new military disorder and a new very dangerous scenario in Syria, it might be very risky to the state of Israel. Israel, the first step, and it's very natural, is to take those areas of the buffer zone in order to protect our borders, and then we have to watch what's going on later on. We are concerned of a lot of facts that we watch in Syria right now, and in particular that the new government is not really controlling Syria. We can see all the minorities are not giving right now any kind of support that's needed to the new government in Damascus. They are suspicious towards this government, and without the internal legitimacy, they cannot proceed. So here again, I agree with General Ha-Cohen that we shall see if Ashara is part of his past or he tends to be something else. Time to tell.
General Ha-Cohen?
Actually, there are practical troubles. First of all, in order to build a state, it is absolutely necessary to build a networking of salaries, to pay for teachers, to pay for the whole apparatus. Actually, right now, they cannot really begin to build that. So the main question is not only who will come to invest in order to rebuild the ruined Syria. It is absolutely ruined. The main question is how to begin to really establish a state. And someone must help them. Of course, Mahmoud Ashar aware about that necessity. Therefore, he is oriented to the Western countries, to France, to United States, in order to get legitimation, rehabilitation, and to get all the support. Without that, it will be just a collection of tribes.
Absolutely. Well, when I look at the financial aspect, naturally it is a pillar of necessity. Right now, Syria is under the Caesar Act, and there is a Caesar 2.0 Act on the Senate floor, on the House floor, actually, on the Foreign Relations Committee. There are voices in Congress calling for the removal of sanctions and to engage with this interim government, as they describe it. But nonetheless, when I really look at Abu Muhammad al-Jalani, the name he adopted for himself when he initially joined al-Qaeda, was a significant figure going up the ranks of this terrorist organization following 9/11, which indicates what inspired him to engage into this terrorist organization. Subsequently, he sat in various camps, prison camps, with the leadership of al-Qaeda and with no other than Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the leader of the Islamic State, was so inspired by the leader of the Islamic State that he received the role, the baton, so to speak, to go to Syria and to establish Jabhat al-Nusra with the sole purpose of conquering the Levant. And that was put in the headline. That was in 2012. 1 year passed, and there was a quarrel between Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi and al-Jalani. Abu Bakr basically came to him and said to him, "You must incorporate in the Islamic State."
They went to Ayman Zawahiri
And they went,
judge.
exactly. They went to the leader of al-Qaeda to be the broker of those discussions.
That's right.
And what happened at the end? They failed to come to an understanding. And Ayman al-Zawahiri, the leader of al-Qaeda, took al-Jalani under his wing. Now, that was in 2013. Between 2013 and 2018, he was in the Golan Heights actively pursuing conquering the Golan Heights. Not only from Syria, but he kidnapped 45 Fijian peacekeepers from the United Nations. I happened to meet them a day after they were released here in Jerusalem and had a number of conversations with them about this matter. He attacked other contingencies and outposts, including the Indonesian one that was somewhat more potent and fought back until they managed to retreat from this area. But he took over the buffer zone. So I would like to move back to the point in which ultimately we're right now seeing a reality in which a man who actively pursued a certain strategy under Israel's sphere of influence, therefore the Iranians couldn't come and help Assad to eradicate this al-Qaeda contingent in the Golan Heights. He pursued a tactical philosophy of Sun Tzu, which said, the wise warriors of old wait patiently for the right time to pursue victory. And he ended up making a deal with the Assad regime, relocating to Idlib under Turkish support, consolidated
support.
power. And then
he also made a lot of troubles to the minorities of Druze in Idlib.
well, there was a massacre.
Yes.
And, there was an international outcry. I still remember it as if it was yesterday, an international outcry. So they tried the person who commanded the forces that al-Jalani himself sent to kill the Druze, and they convicted him, and 2 days later they released him. Is this justice? General, can we accept somebody who is prudent enough to outweigh democracies, leaders within Western civilization that think from, in the best case scenario, 4 years to 4 years, or 6 years, depends on the terms in the respective country, and do not think long term?
The main issue is not only whether at all we can trust this person, because as we know, the philosophy of history asking a lot of questions about who is really leading history. Leaders personally, or the whole atmosphere and the people. And if we are speaking not just about Jalani personally, the whole atmosphere surrounding him, those who are supporting him, all those with them he succeeded to attack Damascus and to come to that position, they are not at all giving us a way to trust that they will not enforce him to follow the routes of al-Qaeda. Because maybe he can change his orientation, but not all those masses of people that who can really detect whether they are really changing their mind.
Colonel, when I look at this, you're one of the chief advisors of Sheikh Muwaffaq Tarif, the spiritual leader of the Druze in Israel. And just over the course of this past week, there was a meeting between Sheikh Muwaffaq and the Christian leadership of the Orthodox Church, which is the largest community of Christians living in Syria today. The Christian Orthodox community asked the Druze to do whatever is necessary to support the Christian communities in Syria who historically live very nearby the Druze communities for various reasons. And it seems like that in the next week or two, we're already going to see humanitarian aid flooding into Christian villages in light of this connection. What can you tell us about that? And of course, within the sensitivities related. And to what degree are we expected to see Israel even more proactive, despite the fact that it's quite proactive these days, to protect the minorities in southern Syria, to avoid what we saw in Sahnaya, and of course in the Alawite regions of Latakia, Tartus, and others.
Maybe you must just describe what is Safnaya. It is a neighborhood.
The southern neighborhood of Damascus.
Yes.
Yes.
That's right. The immediate suburb of close to the southern side of Damascus, there was actually a massacre, and people were slaughtered, and a lot of bodies were found, you know, in the basements of houses. They came in like with this savagery, and those militant people, they cannot be the regime. They cannot control a state and rebuild the state, okay, and there's no vision, no nation, no values. It's something that came from the desert to the city, to this old city of Damascus. So from the minorities' point of view, we share all the minorities here in the Middle East, and in particular in Syria. We see eye to eye the risk when a regime collapses, and those radical Islamists, not all the Muslims. We must say here that the majority in Syria are Sunnis. But most of the Sunnis do not belong to this radical ideology. They want to feel secure in their state.
Absolutely.
They want to live with other minorities in peace. The problem is that those people in this environment that Ashara came from, al-Jalani, is the atmosphere is radicalized, and they cannot change their DNA. A DNA is a DNA. So all the minorities see eye to eye the same risk, and it's natural that they talk to each other. And the Druze were very much active when they from Israel. When they saw that the brothers on the other side are slaughtered. That's why the other minorities, like the Alawites, are in a connection with the Druze, as well as the Christian minority in Israel. They are trying to consult to each other and to try how we can reach out. First of all, the international public opinion, to influence the politics of Arab states that are trying to change the reality, like the Saudis, for example, that are helping the Syrian people, not this government in particular, but the Syrian people to survive. It's still vague. Nobody knows what tomorrow will carry to us all. But here, at least, we share the same concern, the same hope that in Damascus there will be a real government. I mean, that a government that understands that the Syrian people is diverse, and the diversity is part of the past of this state, the Druze, the Alawite, a lot of other names of very little minorities. But this is the multicultural structure of this beautiful society. It cannot be led, as they say, by one color government of radical Sunnis, and cannot be also guided by ministers that most of them are not Syrians. They came from the desert with the Daesh, with the IS, and happened to be the government in Damascus. It's really an absurd, cannot be accepted. And here I think that the neighboring states understand that the only side that is still pushing this government is Turkey. And I think that Turkey should reconsider the strategy in Syria. We expect them at least to suggest different names, other reasonable persons and leaders to take this state, very important state, especially when we talk about the geostrategy. It's located between two civilizations, the one of the Niles and the other, the rivers from Iraq. The two civilizations in the Middle East meet in Syria. So it's a very important place. a very diverse place and should be a reasonable government in Damascus.
You know, I spoke about this with friends in Turkey, and I did highlight to them that they are making a mistake. They're betting on the wrong horse, so to speak, when we're talking about al-Jalani. The Turks do have genuine security concerns when it comes to Syria. There are also opportunities when it comes to Syria for them. Naturally, their economy is in a very bad situation. So for them to utilize much of the construction companies, which Turkey has very good construction companies that also were brought here to Israel to build Tel Aviv, among others, those companies can rebuild Syria in a
But
very
they must get
good way.
support, economical support. They cannot afford
They
it.
cannot afford investments, but nonetheless, the Qataris, the Europeans, and others would then bring in the investments. And that is the irony here that Erdogan is so eager about this, because his most potent supporters are actually those construction companies. And many of those industrial organizations in Turkey are the supporters of the AKP. So there is here a win-win situation of the current president. He sees this as a great opportunity for his country to also emerge out of the very bad situation that it's experienced for many years now. But nonetheless, when we're talking about al-Jalani, ultimately HTS will be the downfall of this project. And that is something that I truly believe. I don't think that it's only neo-Ottomanic aspirations. It's always in the hearts and minds of every Turkish individual.
Beyond Ottomanic inspirations, there are Islamic inspirations.
Exactly.
And Damascus, according to the heritage and tradition of faith in Islam, is a gate to Jerusalem. This is the main issue. Damascus, it is, of course, part of what was belonged to Ottoman Empire, but the center is Jerusalem.
It was said by ex-politicians from Turkey. It was declared that what you're saying, that Damascus is the gate to Jerusalem. And, you know, in Israel, to hear that from a state like Turkey, a democracy, part of NATO, it was not really convenient to hear those people telling this story. They are not from the current government, but they are also officials that everybody knows. So here, those messages are very unacceptable in Jerusalem. And if this competition goes to this direction of religiosity, not only politically speaking, and stabilizing the political situation in Syria, it will be another story. And I'm afraid this can take us to much more risky ways of thinking.
And Israel needs to take that into its calculus. It needs to be very wary. You know, I am a proponent of Turkey being part of NATO. I think that it's very important from NATO's perspective to have them there because of the Montreux Accords, where the Phosphorus ultimately is a very important strait for NATO when we're talking about the Russian element here. But nonetheless, in Hebrew we say kabdeu v'chashdeu, give them honor, but also be wary of what their intentions are. And my wariness stems from when the constitution was changed in Erdogan's favor, granting him many executive powers that he didn't have before in 2017. Where did he go first after that happened? To the tomb of Selim I, the man who defeated
The Mamluks.
first the Persians, Shah Ismail I.
First.
He launched the attack on the 23rd of August, 1514.
Of the Safavids.
Exactly, of the Persians, the Safavids in that time, forcing them to move out, creating a power vacuum, very similar to what happened just now, and then launching 2 years exactly, actually plus 1 day on the 24th of August, 1516, defeating the Mamluks and then taking over Damascus, and from Damascus establishing the road to Jerusalem.
Of course, and we must be aware that in our region, the past is not only history, it is
A roadmap.
practical inspiration for the future.
And that is literally what he said. After visiting, he said, "We are the grandsons of Selim I, and his achievements will be our own." The moment he spoke about that, he established that historic context as a roadmap for his aspirations moving forward, and that is concerning.
And this is a problem with President Trump. Even we can saw that with speaking of President Trump to Netanyahu in the White House, when he told him about the Turks and Erdogan, you must be reasonable. Actually, the Americans don't want to invest their troops anymore in Syria, and they are trying to give all the expectations for stability to Syria in the hands of Erdogan.
Absolutely. And therefore, when it comes to the Americans, Trump has a very good team that is aware of the threats related to this. I hope he listens to good advice. How it's written in the Bibles, for salvation will come from good advice. Mm-hmm. So ultimately, that is a very important point to make. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. This is a topic that we can discuss for hours at end. Colonel Wahabi, thank you so very much.
Thank you.
General Ha-Cohen, it's a pleasure always. And I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. I do want to highlight that TV7 Israel is a donation-based, nonprofit ministry with all of our productions available free of charge, but nonetheless, we are reliant on your generosity as well. And therefore, if you're blessed by the content of our programs, do go to our website at www.tv7israelnews.com, where you can provide a donation and help us produce more of those important programs. Until our next edition, from here in Jerusalem, Shalom. For more of TV7's productions and editorials, we invite you to visit our website at www.tv7israelnews.com.